Welcome back to the Storycraft Society. On this week's episode, we're going to be painting up these plaster rocks, painting up the rest of our hill, getting all of the flock and extra features on this thing. We're going to be finishing up this epic wargaming hill. Let's go. Here we are back for another Thursday. My name is Garmin, and this is the Storycraft Society, where we craft terrain into our stories. And we have been working on an epic wargaming hill. I say wargaming hill not because this is a hill exclusive for wargaming. You could easily use this in your Dungeons and Dragons games, anything like that, which is certainly what I'm going to be using it for. Last week we started this project. We did all of the sculpting as well as the plaster rocks and all of that sort of thing, which was super fun. And now this week we get to finish this thing up. I'm really excited because painting the rocks is super easy. Painting the rest of this is definitely easy. The flock is definitely not as nerve-wracking as some people might think it could be. And then you're gonna end up with this super spectacular looking wargaming or Dungeons and Dragons, whatever terrain hill. You could use it for a train yard if you wanted. Although if I'm gonna be real, people who typically work on model railroads are way better at this kind of stuff than I am. So if you are doing model railroads and you're watching my channel, thank you, I guess. I'm impressed by everything that modelers like that do. So I actually don't have anything else to say other than I'm ready to dive into this thing and get it started. So let's start painting these rocks. All right, I'm really excited to dive into painting the rocks because painting plaster rocks is maybe one of my favorite painting things in all of crafting. I'm not a huge fan of painting things. It's my least favorite part of the process, but painting rocks is pretty cool. So another thing that I really like about the method that I'm gonna be talking about today is that it is incredibly mess up proof. It is really hard to mess this particular paint plan up. It looks amazing every single time. I learned this technique from watching Luke at Geek Gaming Scenics, as well as Neil from Real Terrain Hobbies, and they call it the leopard spotting technique. So let's dive into what it is. So we're gonna start with 3 different colors of just basic craft paint. The first one is going to be Yellow Oxide by Craftsmart. The next one is Territorial Beige by Apple Barrel. The next one is Silver Marlin by Folk Art. These 3 colors don't matter in particular. You just need a yellow, a brownish, tannish, something in there, and then a gray of some sort. I like the bluish grays. I think that that adds more depth to the rocks, but it could be any third color that you want. You could certainly do a green. If you wanted it to have a more mystical look, you could do like a purple or something. That would be really neat. But you're gonna take these 3 colors and you are going to water them down 70-30 water to paint. Then what you're gonna do is take them and you're going to break them down into 4 colors. Now what I mean by that is you have 1, 2, 3 colors here, but then the rocks themselves are white. So you're going to cover the rocks just approximately, this doesn't have to be perfect, in random splotches where 1/4 of the space is white, 1/4 of the space is yellow, 1/4 of the space is brown, 1/4 of the space is the blue-gray. Once you have that done, it's gonna start looking really ridiculous. This is one of those times where I had to put my faith in them, and you kind of have to put your faith in me if you're watching this video and haven't watched theirs, which it looks ridiculous right now. But trust me, once you get all of the next stages done, it will look so much better. So humor me, it gets better, and it gets better fast. Speaking of it getting better, the next step we're gonna do is we're going to pull out a black wash. Now this is just a homemade black wash that I made with a mixture of black acrylic craft paint, water, and just a drop of dish soap, but you could use any wash that you want. I like this one specifically because it's really hard for me to waste Nuln Oil or any good wash on big areas of terrain like this. It's just too expensive, and this is so easy to make. The only mistake that you can make is adding too much dish soap, just a dot. That's all you need. But so we're gonna take and now go over all of the open surface area of the rocks with this black wash. It's gonna darken our rocks down a lot, and now it's gonna start making them look really like rocks. almost to the finish line. The next step is going to be pulling out a medium gray. That medium gray is going to get dry brushed over all of the open rock surface. That's going to get all of the upper highlights and edges to show up as gray, and it's only going to be the recesses and the dark areas that have the 3 color versatility down in them. And lastly, then we're going to take a light gray. I'm just taking a granite gray by Apple Barrel, and I'm going to go down from only top to bottom. I'm never going to come up. I'm only going to go down, but I'm going to do the light highlighting the edges of the rocks from the top down. Once you have that done, the rocks are going to just look amazing, hopefully. I feel like they look amazing for me, or they will, because I haven't painted them yet. But you watched an awesome montage, so hopefully you see how great they turned out. All right, so now that we have the rock done, I think it's looking really, really great. This technique always surprises me with how good the results come out. I'm just 10 out of 10, I love it. And one major reason that I love it so much is that the plaster actually soaks up the washes. This, I think, is a major difference between working with the plaster and working with foam. And it's one reason that I think that this paint job looks so good is because the plaster actually soaks the paint and the wash up. And so that leads to some very smooth and interesting color transitions. Then when you dry brush the grays over the top, it really makes a difference between the recesses and the, peaks and valleys to get this really interesting rock looking texture. This actually yields another benefit, and that's if you find yourself going through and you missed a spot with your black wash or you missed a spot with your dry brushing, you can actually take a brush and dip it into your black wash and then just touch the area. And it's amazing because the black wash will then soak down into the rock. It will look like a smooth transition, and you don't have to worry about trying to do any kind of crazy blends or anything. It just makes fixing problems even that much easier. Super, super pleased with the rocks as they are now, and they're super easy to fix if you mess up. Like I said, it's really mess up proof. Now we're moving on to the next thing, to get all of the dirt painted up. Now the dirt getting painted up is gonna come in 2 stages. The first stage is we're gonna be taking a dark brown, a medium brown, and then a light brown, I guess you could say. And we're gonna go over all of the available surface that's dirt and get those painted and then dry brushed on. One little trick with this is whatever color brown you put into the rocks, I think it's always a really good idea to take that color brown, for me it was the territorial beige, and put that into the dirt color as well. That way it kind of makes the piece all uniform together a little bit and the colors aren't just all completely foreign and crazy. But so we're going to do that. But then the second stage is, remember, we're going to have a path that works its way through. The path will actually get brighter colors. So what I'm going to end up doing is taking a brighter brown than this, and then maybe even like an ivory or a cream, and then I'm going to dry brush in the path. Once I do that, then we're going to be ready to move on to flocks. But that's a lot of work that we got to get done, so let's hit that, get her knocked out. Time for a time lapse. So 2 little trick tips that I can give while I'm doing my highest highlight here. We're going to start with one that I got from actually Mel the terrain tutor, which is you never want to paint the ground underneath of your flock green. And the reason for that is no matter how good you try to keep your flock on there, it always has the potential to chip off. And that's okay, because if you paint it brown to look like dirt underneath where that flock is, then it is no worry, no foul, because it just looks like a patch of grass is just missing, so it's like a bald patch in your hill, which will look totally natural and normal. The next tip is just because you are painting to make sure that your flock can come up, it doesn't mean that you need to go crazy and do all kinds of wild stuff underneath of where all your flock's gonna be, because that's basically all going to be covered up. So the answer to that is just take and do your highest highlight. For me, that's the territorial beige. I only worry about doing that in areas where I think that I'm not going to have flock. So for instance, anywhere that's super uptight on the rocks, or any kind of hill area like this where it's going to show, that's where I'm going to focus all of my super high highlights. It'll look a little silly until you get your flock down, but it saves you a little bit of time and it's kind of unnecessary work. So as you can see, I went ahead and got my road painted in. What really sucks is that I filmed all of that, filmed explanations for it, but my camera completely decided to just forget that I did it. So I will talk about it for a minute. Okay, so to start this all off, I went in with my territorial beige. That's the color that I used as the highlight around all of the rocks. And I used a big dry brushing brush to go over the entire area of generally where I think the path will be. The next step is to pull out a smaller dry brushing brush. I don't know if you can see that, but it's pretty tiny. And then I'm gonna take a khaki, so just another highlight up. And I'm going to, using the dry brush, sketch in the cart tracks. You can do that by drawing the first one out first, then putting the next one in to match it. That's the way that I find works best for me. But once you do that, then with the dirty brush, you start to fill out the edges of both in between the tracks and on the outside of the tracks. The trick to that is actually you want to make sure that you get the light color transition, but you never want to lose the two lines of the main cart path. So once I had that done, then I pulled out an antique white, and then I just went over the individual cart tracks again, just to give them that extra little pop of brightness. Once that's all done with a dirty brush, I kind of drew some areas in between the two cart tracks, because two cart tracks just aren't going to be two lines running parallel. They're going to be broken up in some way. So I made sure to fill some of those areas out as well. But with that done, I will say I am super bummed that I lost that footage. Sorry, everybody. I'm as bummed about it, I think, as you are. The next thing we have to do is flocks. So let's get set up for that, and then we're going to start putting some glue on this thing. All right, so now that we got all of our flock in place and gluing down, it's gonna take overnight to dry at least. That means that we have an opportunity to talk about two things. The first one is very important to this project. The second one is not important to this project, but is important to me. So the first one is, if any of this looked confusing on how to do, that makes a ton of sense. It is actually very, very, very easy to do. I didn't go into a whole big descriptor on how to do it because I already have that video on the channel. If you go to the Goblin Arrows Ambush playlist and you look up the last episode in that series, which is Hills, I will link that in the description below. I go through an in-depth, step-by-step tutorial on how to do this exact thing with these exact colors. That's the most important thing. If you're confused, go check that out down below. Second thing, which is not important to this project, but is important to me, I've been listening to the Witcher 3 soundtrack all day, specifically the Blood and Wine soundtrack. And boy, that thing is fire. It is so good. I can't get enough of it. I don't know what that matters to this project, but literally every time lapse that you've watched in this video, that's all that's been playing in the background. Just like on loop, on loop, on loop, repeat, repeat, repeat. I love it. Can we get some love for the Witcher 3 soundtrack in the comments below? If you haven't listened to it, listen to it. Hey everybody, here we are the next morning and I have not seen the hill yet, so we are getting ready to walk in and check it out. Let's go. Dun, 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 dun. Oh, it looks so sick. Oh, it looks so good. Holy crap. Let's check it out from the other side. Ooh, doggy. That's why we do this. Oh, that's so sick. Let's go. All right, so there you have it. We have our flock all dry, and I'm gonna be honest, every single time I come down the morning after, I get that same magical sense of excitement and wow. And that comes for a couple of reasons. I mean, one of the main reasons is because we use PVA glue to glue the flock down. PVA glue is white, so therefore it lightens the color. So actually the greens and the browns and the yellows all get brightened up a bit when you put the PVA glue on them. So overnight they dry, they darken. For me, they seem to saturate and become more vibrant. The second thing is because the flock, I'm not sure of the actual term, but I would call it, the flock is not color locked, which means if you rub it in between your fingers, you'll actually get color onto your fingers. So what happens when you put water and PVA glue on it is it causes that color to spread out into the other flocks to get this nice, smooth, gradual transition that just really brings all of the colors together and makes them feel like one uniform piece. So I love this stage. You know, the high of seeing it when you walk downstairs for the first time just never ever gets old for me. So what do we have left on this piece? Well, we've got a couple of things. The first thing that I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take some green flock and PVA glue, and I'm gonna go into the rocks, and any place that there is a flat spot, I'm going to add that little tiny pop of green just by squishing it on there, and that will break up the faces of the rock to make a little bit of grass and greenage kind of come through there. The next thing is we're going to be using tufts to go around and fix mistakes. When I'm making a piece like this, for me, it is terrain for my game. It is not a diorama. I say this a lot. I know this is definitely kind of one of my mantras, but it's the truth. The goal for this is being able to fit miniatures and terrain and make it versatile and usable over and over again in my games. So if I put a whole bunch of tufts, it's going to make the ground awfully uneven. It's going to make houses and fences and all that stuff set less comfortably, and that's just not going to work. So why am I using tufts? I'm using tufts specifically to mask mistakes. If I missed painting somewhere, or there is a place where the flock looks off, that's the places where I'm going to be using tufts, and I use them very sparingly. And before I glue one down, I think to myself, what would this potentially interrupt later in a game? As far as anything else, I'm not sure I'm gonna be doing too much else to this piece. Everything else is gonna be after it's finished, after it's dry, taking other terrain and placing it on here to really sell the thing and make it come to life. So probably right now, if you're watching, there is a speed up montage of me setting up the glamour shots for this, which again, I love that so much. That's one of my favorite things to watch back, is me setting a set up. And then as soon as my gabbering mouth stops talking, you're gonna get to see some super cool glamour shots of a super epic hill. Let's get it. What went from me just having a daydream one day to wake up and say, I'm gonna build a super cool hill today. I think the end result is maybe one of the best sets for D&D that I've ever made. I'm speechless. This turned out so well, and for me, this is one of those videos, projects, whatever you want to call it, that is one that I will not forget, probably for a long time. But That's it for this video. Hopefully you enjoyed it, watching me make the most epic hill that I could make. If you like this content, definitely leave this video a like. Hit the subscribe button if you want to see when these videos come out every week, which is Thursday Eastern Standard Time at noon. But that's all I've got for this week. So until next week, I'll be seeing you. The real issue is now I have to figure out where to store this thing. I mean, it's massive. It's like, I don't know, over 20 inches in both directions. Not gonna fit up there. Whew. Figuring it out. I watched it from watching Luke at Geek Gaming Scenic. I learned it from watching Luke at Geek Gaming Scenics. Geek Gaming Scenics. Geek Gaming Scenics. Geek Gaming Scenics. Why is that so hard to say?